And it's Avrum Weiss, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, hello, you guys. This is your host, Andrea, with From Mrs. to Ms. We have a special guest with us today. We have Dr. Avrum Weiss with us in the house today. Hello, and thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure. Glad to meet you.
Absolutely. So Dr. Weiss is an award-winning author, speaker, and consultant known for his pioneering work in experiential psychotherapy. He's trained hundreds of therapists in a personal relational approach and focuses on understanding men's internal lives and helping men and women gain new understanding of each other. That's huge because we need that. His recent book, Hidden in Plain Sight, explores men's fears of women in intimate relationships. He's based in Maine and he resides with his wife and dog on Mid-Coast Island. Lovely. And it's your wife's birthday today. You said that's wonderful.
Happy birthday, Michelle.
Yes, I love that. That's amazing. So let's start at the beginning. So what led you to pursue a career focused on understanding the dynamics of both men and women?
Well, I really have been working more trying to understand the inner lives of men because I have this sort of oppositional personality. I get interested in things that people overlook.
Oh.
My field has largely overlooked men. 100 and odd years ago, Freud started the field. Most of his patients were women.
Yeah. Wow.
And the field has sort of followed suit. There are far more women in psychotherapy. All the theories of psychotherapy are developed around the experience of women, and then men were sort of an aftersight.
Yeah.
And largely, there's not a lot of work about what the interior lives of men are about. And
Yeah.
so I naturally am oriented towards looking at things that other people overlook.
I love that because I think that really happens a lot. We tend to think of, well, I do when I'm thinking relationships or anything like that, I automatically think women. And we kind of always think that the women are the ones that are, the underdog trying to figure out what's going on. But quite often it is the man, and they are often just as fearful or maybe uneducated as women can be, right?
Well, the problem is that then men are sort of not interested or reluctant to participate in psychotherapy, and then we pathologize them and blame them for not being interested when in fact we haven't made it very
Easy.
welcoming to them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. So tell us a little bit more about the theory of experiential psychotherapy. I haven't heard that before, and how we can apply that to our everyday lives within a relationship.
Well, experiential psychotherapy is sort of, in some ways, the theory that underlies a lot of other theories of psychotherapy, but it never became very widely known. Although, for example, a very popular theory now is EFT,
Okay.
emotionally focused therapy, and that came right out of, and they acknowledge came right out of experiential psychotherapy. So
Yeah.
psychotherapy is one of those fields where people keep reinventing the wheel, but don't acknowledge that they did that.
Mm-hmm.
So experiential has sort of gotten lost, but it started back in the 50s in Atlanta with the work of Carl Whitaker and his colleagues. And it's an approach that takes people at their word. Rather than sort of leading with theory, it starts by listening to people talk about the world as they actually see it. We listen to people and we're interested in how you really see things without trying to tell you how you should see the world, but listening to how you actually do see the world.
Oh, wow. That seems very interesting. I like the
Kind
thought
of
of that.
respectful.
It is kind of respectful. So much of your research centers on men's fear of women, right?
Yes.
So, okay, so what factors kind of contribute to this fear, and how does it impact their intimate relationships as well as ours as women, I guess?
Well, it has everything to do with men's intimate relationships. And the first part of the title of the book is Hidden in Plain Sight, because those fears are there and operating all the time and have everything to do with heterosexual relationships. They're there, but they're hidden because when you say to women that, actually your partner is, a lot of what's going on with you and your male partner has to do with him being afraid of you, they look at you like you're an alien from another planet. Like it seems like a ludicrous. Now, wait a minute. Come on. He's bigger than me. He's stronger than me. He makes more money than me. He's all in charge and he's got all the power and the privilege. Why in the world would he be scared of me? So it seems like a bit of a preposterous notion.
Yeah.
But there's a lovely graphic in the book of are you old enough? You know what a teeter-totter is? A
I
seesaw?
do. Yes, I
Yeah,
do.
okay.
I do.
I
I
don't
do.
think they have them anymore, but
No.
yeah. But so it has a graphic of a stick figure of a guy and a stick figure of a girl on a teeter-totter with the guy, of course, on top and the
Yeah.
girl on, and people look at it and they say, oh, see, there you go, man in a dominant position. But if you look carefully, the woman has 1 foot off of the teeter-totter.
Oh.
So you realize that although it looks like the man is in the dominant position, the woman, you realize if she takes that other foot off the teeter-totter, the man is going to come crashing back down to
Hmm.
earth. And so Martin Luther King had an extraordinary quote. He said, segregation scars the soul of the oppressor as much as it scars the soul of the oppressed.
Ooh.
And what he was saying is what several people have said is that any system scars the soul of the oppressor as much as any hierarchical system doesn't just damage the oppressed person, it damages the oppressor. And
Okay.
so in workshops, I often say to people, look, if we're going to talk about the patriarchy, men and women are in the same boat.
Hmm.
Now, we can spend a lot of time talking about, I will freely acknowledge, first of all, the boat is sinking and we're all drowning. Okay, now we can
Okay.
waste a lot of time, and I will freely acknowledge men built the boat, they designed the boat, they built the boat, they benefit from the boat, they maintain the boat. I agree, I admit. But while we're arguing about that, the boat's sinking and we're all drowning.
Oh no.
So we can spend our time blaming men,
Yeah.
all that, or we can figure out how to work together
Yeah.
to repair the boat and not die.
That's a great analogy. So when we think of fear, what kinds of things are we thinking about when we say men are fearful of women?
Well, one of the things that men are really afraid of is men are afraid of being dominated and controlled by women.
Hmm.
And the way you know they're afraid of it is because they keep protesting that they're not afraid of being dominated. As
Okay.
Shakespeare said, the lady doth protest too much, methinks. So my title for the book, which the publisher would not agree with, is I wanted to call the book Pussy Whipped.
Okay.
Because why is it that the worst thing one man can say to another man is that you're pussy whipped? Think
Right.
about it. Why is it that the worst insult is that not only you're controlled by another woman,
Uh-huh.
by a woman,
Uh-huh.
but really, if you go down a little deeper, you're controlled by your need of a woman. So
Yes.
why are men obsessed with sex? So it's not just, I need a woman for an orgasm, because you don't need a woman for an orgasm.
Correct.
You can have an orgasm all by yourself.
Correct.
So there must be something else going on besides
Yeah.
an orgasm. So
Okay.
women, we've convinced women that it's about orgasm,
Mm-hmm.
but it can't just be about orgasm. What's going on is not about libido. It's not about sex drive. It's not about orgasm. It's about validation.
It's
So
huge.
there's an old saying that, I'm going to get this wrong, I'll try not to. Women need to have sex to feel, women need to feel love to have sex.
Mm-hmm.
Men need to have sex to
To
feel
feel
love.
love. Yes.
That's what's going on for men. It's not about sex drive. If
Yeah.
it's about sex drive, they would just masturbate and not need you.
Right. But they need the
It's about
nourishing and the companionship.
affirmation, validation, because
Mm.
men tend to not be as experienced in other forms of intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
What you're experiencing from men is their strong, since it's all in one box,
Mm-hmm.
what you're experiencing is, this is the only way I know how to feel loved.
Mm. Wow. Yeah,
So the
that,
fear, so let me just say,
yeah,
what, so the
sure.
fear is, if you want to have sex with me, I don't feel loved. I don't
Yeah.
feel okay. I don't feel okay as a person. And that's the urgency. So that's why women learn how to fake orgasm,
Mm-hmm.
because they're responding to their partner's urgency about not feeling loved.
Wow. Huh. I had to really stop and think about that, because I think of that when we say that sex or men need sex to feel love, how does that come into play then with, like, when men want to hook up on the first date all the time and they just want to, do that and move on, or they get bored really quick? How do you get them to that point where they want the love, they want the validation?
I
How do we get
think it
there?
is what they want, but they don't understand that themselves.
Oh, they don't know it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do we get them to know it?
Well, I don't think, someone you just met for the first time, so I don't really think you should take on the project of trying to educate somebody you just met. I mean, if I think
Yeah.
that's like, see you, move on to the next.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you do often discuss the dynamics between men and women. So, okay, so let's explore this for what is the most crucial aspect of men that women often overlook?
That they're scared.
They're
This
just
is
scared.
this is the big secret, is that and it's an incredibly helpful and critically important thing, because so the book I'm working on now is what women learn from their mothers about men.
Mm, that's a great
And
topic.
well, it's not a friendly topic, because
Yeah.
it's often not I know. I thought I turned that off, but it's still there.
Yeah, that's okay.
It's often not such friendly information.
Yeah.
And I've compared it to, in the African American community, what's known as the talk,
Oh, what's the
which
talk?
is right, which is the talk that parents often have with their kids about what to do when you encounter a dangerous situation, a dangerous
Yeah.
racist situation, like how to
Yeah.
handle it when you're in a dangerous situation. Well, I think the equivalent is the talk
Mm-hmm.
that moms have with their daughters about
Mm-hmm.
how to live with men.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times that talk
Mm-hmm.
is how to protect yourself
Yeah.
against not necessarily danger, sometimes danger, but
Yeah.
often how to protect yourself against disappointment,
Mm.
having a male partner.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to be as close as you would like to be. You're going to feel let down often.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you might want to make sure you have your own money.
I was just gonna
Those are the
say
kind of,
independence. Yeah. It's a huge
right.
thing.
You might want to take care of yourself
Yeah.
and not count on a man.
Yeah.
And so women carry this weight into relationships of a set of expectation from generations of women
Mm-hmm.
of about expectations about men.
Mm-hmm.
Men come into the relationship and they feel those negative expectations.
Okay.
And it's an old saying, people live down to the level, if your teacher thinks you're a dummy, you're probably not going to be an A student. You probably will live down to those. And so then you end up in these relationships that end up looking, often therapists talk about parent-child relationships.
Yeah.
The woman, much to her dismay,
Mm-hmm.
ends up more in the relationship like a parent, being critical, almost condescending at times, and the man ends up in the relationship in the role of the child, saying
Yes.
things like, I can't get it right with her. I keep trying. She keeps moving the goalposts.
Heard
And
that.
you end up in very low sex relationships, because
Yeah.
most people don't want to have sex with their parents.
Yep.
So the relationship stops feeling erotic, stops feeling adult, and starts feeling more parent-child. And neither person are happy with that arrangement.
Yeah.
Neither person wants it, but are these ghosts in the room
Yeah.
of these, generational expectations.
That's very interesting. And I know I've seen that happen in past relationships with myself
Yeah.
too. And I think it's also sometimes the lesser they do. If a man loses their job, a man isn't doing exactly the things that you're expecting him to do, help around the house. That's when we do step into that dominant role, right? As
Let
women.
me jump in and say, listen to the word you use, which is the word everyone uses, help around the house.
Yes.
Like it's your job. Like, how did that, like,
Yeah.
who told, why is it your job? Like,
Yeah.
like, see right there, there's those expectations right there.
Yeah.
Because probably in the house you grew up, it was your mother's job.
Yeah.
But how did that happen? Like, why did we decide that it's so, right? Already it's set up
Yeah.
as a hierarchy.
Wow. I never thought about it that way. You're so right. We just automatically assume as women, our role is to cook and clean and do the laundry and do all these things. And we're looking to the man just to come and help us with these
Help,
things.
right?
That was
To
a
help.
good one.
The only letter to the editor I've ever written in my life was, I wrote a letter because there was an article in the paper about Mr. Mom.
Uh-huh.
And I wrote a letter to the editor and I said, a man who takes care of his children is called a parent,
Yeah.
a father, not Mr. Mom. He's not
Mm-hmm.
doing a mom's job. He's called a father.
Yes, that's really true. That's really true. So how can both men and women improve their understanding of this?
Well, I think you have to in what's in research terms, it's called bracketing. You have to when you're sort of unconsciously following a generational script, you have to first start by recognizing the script that you're following. So you have
Mm.
to notice words like help. Like, how
Yeah.
come we both use the word help? Like, it's not help. It's like,
Yeah.
or like I've said to my wife things like, I notice like we break down, okay, like Amazon boxes come
Yeah.
and she takes the box and she puts it by the recycling bin.
Uh-huh.
Like, so you just decided it's my job to break down the box.
Yeah.
Like,
I would do the
so
same.
right, right.
Yeah.
So I would be fine
Hmm.
with doing that, but I'd like us to have a conversation about that where we
Uh-huh.
decide that I don't want you to just assume that I'm a guy, so I break down it.
Yeah.
So, like we need to talk about these things and not just sort of unconsciously follow men break down Amazon box.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's
Because, and
some,
of course, the other side too,
yeah.
that I would assume that so I think it's sort of a pain in the butt, right? That people
Yeah.
say, well, that's more work. Well, yes, it is.
Hmm.
But what we're talking about is more work, but it is also, it's the opportunity to be a bigger human being.
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny. I've always thought of those things. And growing up, my parents were older. They didn't have me till they were 40. So it was that understanding. My dad did these things. My mom never put gas in the car. My mom never mowed the lawn, things like that. But the things she did do was the cooking and the cleaning and the laundry and everything. And so I've kind of carried that I've never mowed a lawn. I mean, I don't know how many women have, but
See, I don't think that, like, I don't think you're that limited as a human being by not mowing the lawn. But what
yeah.
I often say to men in my office, where I think it becomes more critical is, for example, I will say to young fathers in my office, you need to be the one to get up in the middle of the night with your children.
Mm.
And they'll be like, well, I have to get up in the morning, go to work. And I don't care,
Yeah.
because the middle of the night is the only unsupervised time you will have with your children. And they know
Yeah.
immediately what I mean, because women supervise men's time
Hmm.
with children because
Hmm.
they're worried they'll break the baby, you know? And so I say, if you get up in the middle of the night, it's the best bonding time. You will never
Yeah.
regret it. You will have a fabulous time
Yeah.
and you will get so much closer to your children, because being with your kids while somebody's looking over your shoulder is not
That's
a
not
very
fun.
intimate experience.
No.
But you get up in the middle of the night, it'll completely change. And the other
Yeah.
thing I also always recommend to young families is send the mom out of town for a weekend.
Mm.
Don't let her call home.
Yeah.
Don't let her make any meals in advance. Don't let her arrange any play dates.
Uh-huh.
Just tell her to leave for the weekend and you figure it out.
Yeah.
Again, it changes the whole structure of the family. And almost every time I've done this,
Hmm.
when she comes back, the dad is the one who says, when can we do this again?
Mm. Because he
They love it.
enjoyed it.
They love it.
Yeah. Wow. That's really interesting. So in one of your discussions, you highlighted how men tend to withdraw emotionally during arguments. So what factors contribute to this? And additionally, why do couples often find themselves in these same repetitive arguments all the time?
Well, I think it's the modal way that heterosexual couples argue. I think it is probably the most common way that heterosexual couples argue.
Yeah.
And the reason it happened, well, first of all, just to describe it, first of all, it's most likely that the woman is going to be the one who brings up something that she's unhappy with in the relationship,
Hmm.
because they have different goals in mind.
Okay.
Usually the woman is the one who's sort of actively paying more attention to what's going on in the relationship and trying to make things better,
Hmm.
whereas the man is much more likely to be looking for sort of peace and quiet and hoping that things don't get worse.
Yeah.
So the woman is more likely to bring up something that she would like to make things better. The
Hmm.
problem is that men almost always inevitably hear that as criticism, even if she doesn't intend
Mm.
it that way. We can go into it, but there are a lot of reasons that he's likely to hear that as criticism.
Yeah.
So he is probably less emotionally comfortable than she is,
Hmm.
again, for a lot of reasons we can go into. So he feels less comfortable with the emotional level of the conversation.
Hmm.
So he wants to bring it back down to a level that he's comfortable with. So people think that when men try to calm things down, they're trying to control women. I don't think they're trying to control women. I think they're trying to soothe themselves.
Oh.
So they don't really know a lot about how to soothe themselves, and so they withdraw.
Oh. And then we get more upset. Now they've
You get
withdrawn
more
from us.
upset because you're trying to make a connection.
Yeah.
The man's withdrawing, you get more upset, they get more agitated, so they withdraw further, which
Yeah.
is throwing gasoline on the fire. You get more upset, they withdraw more. And that, I think, is the most common pattern
Yeah.
in heterosexual couples in conflict.
So how would we fix that?
Well, it's the obvious question. I think the starting point is for women to understand that men are not withdrawing as a power play, but they're withdrawing because they're flooded. It's not that they're withdrawing because they don't care. It's that they're withdrawing because they're terrified.
Yeah.
And so when you're talking to a child, and I don't mean to imply that men are children, but rather that you understand it with a child. If you're talking to a child who's terrified, you don't keep pursuing them.
Yeah.
You back off, you
Yeah.
calm down. So that would be a helpful thing for a woman in that situation to do.
Yeah.
And then the man has to take responsibility for managing his own emotions in that situation. He has to learn how to say, I'm really past the point where I can participate in a helpful conversation at this point. I need to fill in the blank, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm going to go for a run, or I'm going to call a friend, or I'm going to space out with a video game. I will be back at 2:00 and we can pick up this conversation then.
Well, see, I like that you're saying that he'll come back and ask, to re-engage in the
He
conversation
has to be
because,
responsible for that. Yes.
right. It's not just where they're like, because I did date somebody who was like, I can't handle this conversation. And he just would completely shut down. There
No.
was no, let's talk
You're
about
going
it
to take a
later.
time out, then you have to be responsible for coming back to it. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's the important part because
That's absolutely critical. Absolutely.
yeah.
Very,
And do you
very
think,
much. Yeah.
what's like the percentage of that of men? Because I feel like some men aren't in this set. They're not totally fearful. They are more dominant. They do kind of know, I want to say, how to have these conversations and maybe manipulate them a certain way to make us feel like that. Is that just me thinking that way when really it is because they're just fearful? Are they trying
I
to do
don't
that?
think there are any heterosexual men that don't have some innate fear of women.
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
that's built in from childbirth because we have a setup where most kids are raised by a woman.
Yeah.
And so we're entirely dependent on a female caretaker from our earliest moments. And so it's sort of hardwired in from our earliest living moments.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Huh. So on your website, you address men's fears of inadequacy in various aspects of life, financially, emotionally, and of course, sexually. Can you elaborate on these fears and kind of provide us some insight into how a woman can recognize if her partner is struggling with some of these insecurities?
Yeah, the problem is, actually, I write for Psychology Today, and the article I just published, I think came out yesterday or today, is exactly about this. It's called Fragile Masculinity. And the problem is that men are socialized to equate their self-worth with what they do to provide and protect for women and children.
Okay.
So basically, if you're happy, I'm okay.
Happy wife, happy life.
Yeah. If you're unhappy, it's not that I feel bad for you.
Yeah.
It's that I feel bad about me.
Oh.
So if you come home and say, I had a bad day, it's not just I feel bad for you. It's now I have a problem to fix that is my responsibility and reflects badly on me as your partner. And until I fix that problem, I feel some sense of inadequacy as a man until I fix your problem. You haven't asked me to solve the problem.
No.
You don't particularly want me to solve the problem,
Right.
but I'm not going to feel okay about myself until I fix what you don't even think of as a problem. So you're puzzled
Hmm.
because I feel this urgency to solve something that you haven't even defined as a problem, much less asked me to fix.
Yeah. That's what I was just thinking. I'm like, but sometimes we don't necessarily want you to fix the problem. We just want a sounding
Absolutely.
board. We want you,
Absolutely.
yeah, to
Right.
rub our shoulder and
But
say it'll
there's
be
so much
okay.
socialization for men that your value as a man. So the article about fragile masculinity is that in this culture,
Hmm.
we equate masculinity with action and competence and potency. There was a really interesting study. They asked a group of people, what would it mean to not be a man, and their answers all reflected not being potent, not
Yeah.
being, and all about not being competent, productive.
Yeah.
And for women, it's all about, women have much more sense of, I'm a woman because I'm a woman. I was
Hmm.
born a woman. I'll always be a woman. I didn't have to do anything to become a woman. You can't take it
Hmm.
away from me. I'll still be a woman. And
Hmm.
men have much more of a sense of being a man is something you have to earn and
Hmm.
protect always, and is always under threat. And if you ever do anything that makes you look feminine in any way, shape, or form, then you are no longer a man.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, feminine in our culture encompasses um, warmth, tenderness,
Hmm.
intimacy. So men are sort of raised to believe that if you appear a little too tender or a little too soft or a little too vulnerable, then you are at risk of being perceived. And you can get
Hmm.
into really interesting stuff with this. And
Yeah.
I'm certainly going to irritate at least some of your audience, because politically, candidates do better the more they posture as masculine, and
Mm.
the more they exhibit feminine traits, the less well they do in the polls. And so
Ouch.
candidates who posture in more hyper-masculine ways,
Yes.
so you can look at candidates who posture in more masculine ways and
Hmm.
look at internet searches for things like erectile dysfunction and how
Hmm.
to get girls, and you can see the correlation between who voted from them and those internet searches.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Hmm.
We'll
Okay.
we'll leave the candidate names,
We'll stay
but we'll
there.
just say the candidates who have done things like bragged about the size of their penis and their testosterone level, those
Yes.
candidates in the district, they do well. There are more internet searches for like porn and penis extenders and things like
Uh-huh. Oh, wow.
that. Yeah.
Interesting. So,
Mhm.
how talk about the fear of inadequacy sexually then. So where does that go? What do they feel there?
Well, this is the stuff we were talking about just a little while ago, that for men, sex can become so divorced from pleasure and so much about adequacy and so much
Hmm.
about reassurance and validation of being loved that it can become almost entirely divorced from pleasure, so that sex
Mm.
becomes almost more like a task or
Sure.
a
Yeah.
chore for men. And for many men, it becomes really almost not pleasurable.
Mm. Does
It's
that sometimes
terribly.
just become like this mental thing where and then they can't get erect and then they're just going through all of these different issues and then they lose confidence in themselves, right?
Yeah, I mean, they
Yeah.
may or may not be erect. It certainly might be erectile
Yeah.
dysfunction, but it can also be just that they're sort of a million miles away,
Yeah.
they're so other focused. So again, this is the preoccupation. I wrote another article about why are men so obsessed with orgasm, and women
Hmm.
talk about this all the time, that they fake orgasm just to
Hmm.
sort of get him off of them,
Yeah.
because the focus for the man becomes. I just watched an old um, who was the comedian? I'm blocking on the name of the
Mm.
comedian, but it's an old clip. And
Uh-huh.
he did a thing about how men are terrified to talk with a woman about orgasm, but
Uh-huh.
how preoccupied they are, because it's like, did I do a good job? Like
Yeah.
they're asking their mommy, am I okay?
Yeah.
Um,
I hate when they ask that. It's awkward. It's and What are we going to say as women? No, you sucked. We're not going to say anything
Right.
like
See,
that,
no,
right?
you sucked. See, even though it's a question about you, see, it immediately goes to see how that happened. Right. It's
Yeah.
not, the question was about you, but it immediately went to you sucked, like it was about them. And that's exactly what they're afraid of.
Oh
It's
gosh.
really about them, that
Yeah.
it's really about how they did.
Huh. So what would you tell a man to do in order to get past that?
Well, I think that sex, certainly sex, but like everything, but certainly sex is a relational and mutual experience. I don't
Mhm.
believe, like when people come to me, I'm a consultant for a matchmaking company. And
Fun.
so I do a lot of these conversations about dating,
Yeah.
and I'll plug them. It's the matchmaking company.
I love it.
And
Yeah.
one of the things I say to people is they'd come back at date and say, wow, that was really, I had a great time, but I don't know if he did. I'm like, of course you know if he had a good time. You were
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Like it was a mutual experience. If you had a good time,
Yeah.
then he had a good time. You know the
Yeah.
difference between being with somebody who had a good time and being with somebody who wasn't having a good time.
Right.
So if you're having sex with somebody, I hope you know if they were enjoying it. If you weren't, then it probably wasn't very good sex.
Yeah.
You're not
Totally.
sure whether the other person was enjoying themselves, then that
Yeah.
was not good sex.
Right.
You
Exactly.
may not know if they had an orgasm, but you
Yeah.
certainly know whether it was a good experience.
Right. Huh.
Talk about that.
Yeah.
Don't, not so concretely focused on orgasm.
Hmm.
But if it wasn't such a good experience, then it wasn't for both of you. And if it
Right.
was a good experience, then it was for both of them. And you can talk about it. And
So talk about it
yeah,
more as a whole, like the whole
yeah,
experience itself, instead of
yeah.
pinning it down to the
And then
little
in that
things.
conversation, you can talk about orgasm. But if it was a great
Hmm.
experience for both of you and she didn't have an orgasm, that's not really going to be all and end all of it. If
Yeah.
you had a great time and didn't have an orgasm, you can talk about that in the conversation, but
Yeah.
that's not going to ruin it for
Yeah.
her if she had a great time.
See, I think I would feel so bad telling him. I'd probably be the faker one. Like, I would feel so bad.
Because you've bought into that idea that it's deficient on his part, that maybe the woman hasn't had an orgasm in 17 years.
Yeah.
Like, why would he magically be all responsible for that? He wasn't there for the first 16 years.
Right.
And
Well, if he's good, he should know what to do to get
right, somehow
that.
magically he should know what to do.
He should know
Right.
what to do. Yeah. So
Well,
how,
that's
uh,
a little magical thinking.
yeah, it is. That's interesting.
How would he know?
And those conversations, I mean, those are a lot easier to have with somebody who you've been in a relationship with or you're married to, but
Of
someone you
course.
just initially started dating, I don't
Of
even know
course.
how to approach any kind of
Well,
conversation like that.
here's a completely anachronistic, I'm way old and nobody but an old person would say, it's like maybe you shouldn't have sex with somebody on the first date because
Ooh.
it's like, because if you haven't talked to them yet,
Yeah, maybe have
maybe you're
those
not ready for that
conversations.
conversation.
But then there's that, and I've talked about that on many episodes. It's like that constant feeling like it's the expectation for us to have sex on the first date with a
Right.
man. But
But
again,
how could the sex be intimate if
yeah, when you don't even
you
know
can't
them.
even talk to each other yet?
Yeah. So that's just another reason why we should be pushing that down the road and get to know each other first.
I don't think you have to wait forever, but I
Yeah.
think it'd be nice if you knew each other a little bit, at least could have
Yeah.
a conversation.
Agreed. I agreed. So how does the fear of abandonment affect men? That's a big
It,
thing. So like
it's
what?
really it's really what lies underneath all the other fears. In the book, I talk
Yeah.
about 7 fears that men have in women, and
Okay.
abandonment is really the one that lies underneath them. And people think that's a little crazy, like men are not afraid of being abandoned by women. But I can tell you one simple thing that you know is true that'll prove to you that this is true,
Hmm.
which is when men and women break up, who starts dating first?
Well, I'm just gonna say I would.
No,
For
it's
me,
men.
is it men? I'm an
Maybe you
anomaly.
personally, but when women break up, men start dating again immediately.
And that's because of that fear of being alone.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm, that's interesting. And quite often, I have been through an experience with a man in a relationship where everything was great, but he needed something on the side just to talk to and get that validation, that affirmation. Why is it not enough to come from the person
Well,
that you're with?
I don't know him, so I don't know with
Sure.
him, but I think that if I were sitting and talking with you and him, I
Hmm.
would say that's fine, but why aren't you talking with her, you,
Yeah.
about that? Like, if that's something you feel you need, I don't think that needs to be a secret. Why wouldn't you talk with the person you're dating about that?
Yeah. Because I'm
Why
sure
would you
it goes
hide it?
back to abandonment issues as a child or something, right? That
Afraid to
need
leave.
that, yeah, should I leave? There's nothing.
Well,
What do I do?
that's how I started on this whole track, because I'm talking with a lot of guys and they keep telling me all these things they're unhappy about in their relationship.
Hmm.
And I kept saying to them, well, like, are you talking to your partner about this? And they looked at me like I was an idiot. And
Hmm.
they would say, no, I'm not going to talk to her about this.
Yeah.
And then I realized, why are they not talking to their partner? There's only one explanation, which is they're afraid to talk to her.
Yeah.
And that's where the whole idea for the book came from, is I realized that guys are not telling their partners the things that they're unhappy with. Well, I
Hmm.
worked with one guy who went all the way through the divorce
Hmm.
and never once told his wife what he was upset about. Not once, never said a word.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which was
Divorced with
probably why she wanted it if you're
two
not
little
communicating.
boys. He never said a word to her.
That's
He
crazy.
was that scared.
That's really sad. That's really sad.
I
And
don't
so,
think it's that unusual.
yeah. So it really is helpful for if you're starting out dating somebody new to open that dialogue. Make sure there's open communication and say it up front. Is that,
Great way to start. I mean, it's
yeah.
again, I work with a lot of people who are dating, and I always say to people, it's just, it sounds crass, but it's just like a job interview.
Yeah.
If you go on a job interview and you tell them that you can do all these things you can't do, what happens when you get the job?
Yep.
So, if you go on a date and you pretend to be some fabulous person that you're not, now what?
Totally.
What are you going
Happens
to do in
all
the
the
second
time,
date?
Avram. It
You know?
happens all the time.
So
Where
I
yeah.
think, I like to tell a story. I went on a date once with a woman who,
Hmm.
as we were emailing back and forth, she said to me, she said, well, I'm a lawyer for a big pharma company.
Okay.
And I'm pretty liberal in my politics. And I said, I don't know, I'm not sure this is going to work.
Yeah.
But let's go have dinner. It sounds like it'd be really interesting. So we had just it must have been like a 3-hour dinner. We just
Yeah.
like really got into it, and goes back a while. It's when Obamacare was the
Okay.
big news of the day. So she looked at me and she said, well, have you read the bill? I'm like, what do you mean have I read it? It's like thousands of pages. She said, well, I've read the bill. I'm
La-di-da.
like, damn. So we had a great evening,
Yeah.
and I still remember it. It's probably 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Very interesting woman, beautiful woman,
Uh-huh.
bright. We had a fabulous time. We didn't have a second date.
Well,
She would have been a great friend,
yeah.
but many people would say, oh, that's a failure. That was not
Mm,
a failure.
to
We had a great
recognition.
time. It's a success because we realized we are not potential romantic
Yeah.
partners. That's a success in
Yeah.
dating.
I think that's important because I often feel the most at peace with something when if I have a date and then afterwards I recognize we're just not a match. It's just
Right.
not
It doesn't mean
compatible.
I mean, I think we left on really good terms.
Yeah.
I liked her. She liked me. I don't think she's a bad person. I hope she
Yeah.
doesn't think I'm a bad person.
Just wasn't a
We had a lot of
match.
fun, but we didn't go on a second date.
Yeah.
That's not, that's a
Yeah.
success.
Yeah. And you're also not pretending to be somebody that you're not. Then you go on,
Exactly.
continue on this date. And
Which
now
would have just
you are
mucked things
being,
up.
yeah.
People
Yeah.
get confused in dating. They think that the idea is to try to get as many people, it's like they think they're in high school.
Hmm.
They want to get as many people as possible to like them.
Yeah.
You just want to find one person to like
This
you.
one.
One person to like you a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not a
Not
lot of
just
people to like you a little.
right.
You're not
I
running
like
for office, you know?
that's funny. So, okay, so what advice do you give to individuals that are just stuck in unhealthy relationships and kind of unsure how to proceed? How can they get out of that and move forward?
No, I think it's the same advice. I think the best definition of intimacy I've ever heard, a couple of
Hmm.
colleagues of mine was a father-son, the Malones, Pat and Tom Malone.
Hmm.
A brilliant definition of intimacy. They said intimacy is the ability to be yourself in a
Hmm.
relationship with someone else, which is it's one of those things, like
Powerful.
a year from now, you might still be thinking about that.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
when you're stuck in a really bad relationship, I think that means a relationship in which you've really gotten lost and you are no longer yourself.
Mm.
That through over years,
Yeah.
You know, a death by 1,000 cuts, right? It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't happen all at once. It's the
Mm-hmm.
death by 1,000 cuts. You find out all of a sudden you realize, I don't like the person I am in this relationship anymore.
Mm.
I have just become someone in this relationship that I don't like, and I don't know how to be myself anymore.
Yeah.
So then
Yeah.
I think you have two choices, you know,
Okay.
stay or go, for one way of talking about it. But to me, I always say to people, before you go,
Mm-hmm.
before you leave the relationship, I think the essential thing to do is to put all your cards on the table and take the chance of being yourself
Mm-hmm.
radically before you go.
I
And
like
I'll
that.
give you an example that I think is going to sound crazy, but I don't think it was.
Mm-hmm.
We had friends, they're not close friends, distant friends.
Mm-hmm.
And they had had a pretty unhappy marriage for quite a long time. And apparently it was an asexual marriage.
Okay.
And he came home and said to his wife, you know what? We have an asexual marriage. We're apparently not going to have sex with each other anymore. I'm going to go find a girlfriend. I don't want to divorce you,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't want to have a life with no sex. So I'm being honest with you. I could just go have an affair.
Yeah.
But I don't want to do that. I don't want to be the son. And everybody was so critical of him. Oh, a cheater.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you, this is probably 30 years ago. This happened. I look back at that and I think, good for him.
Yeah.
What courage.
Mm-hmm.
Why? I mean, he just telling it like it is.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that particularly is what people
Yeah.
should do.
Yeah.
But you know, if you I'm trying to think of a more everyday kind of example. You have always wanted to leave your job and do the work that is really your heart's calling, but you don't because your partner says the family can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than divorcing and going and doing it, tell your partner, this is it. That I need to do this. This is what, and rather than divorce and go do it, I'm going to do it now. I hope that our marriage can sustain me doing this, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe it can't, but I'm going to give it a shot and see if go
Yeah.
ahead and do the things you think you would do if you got divorced.
Yeah.
Do them and see if your marriage can contain the you that you really think you want to be.
Interesting. Yeah, your example with the man that wanted to go have sex elsewhere, I actually kind of do applaud that. I mean, I think I'm on the train with you. I think I would rather him come to me and say, listen,
Yeah.
this is what I'm going to do. Give me that opportunity to decide, do I want to stay in this relationship?
Right.
Because if you're just going to go off and sleep around and, now you have lost my respect,
Yeah.
right? You're not giving me the respect
Right.
of having that conversation, letting me make a
Right.
decision on that.
And also,
Yeah.
why would that be such a big surprise?
Yeah. If you're not having sex, I mean, obviously
Right.
they're going to start looking elsewhere, but it also then gives you the opportunity to open that conversation and figure
Right.
out and maybe go, wait a second, I don't want you to do that. Let's see what we can figure out here.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah, but
I like
there are
it.
so many more everyday, less dramatic examples of
Yeah.
that, where people have just given up big pieces of themselves and blamed their partner.
Yeah.
And I think the answer to your question is reclaim those parts of yourself, quit blaming, because then they get divorced
Mhm.
and then they take up tennis or
And do all
change
those things.
jobs or
Yeah.
move to Arizona or whatever. Like, well, just do that now.
Yeah.
Stop blaming your partner and
Yeah.
be yourself and see what happens.
Yeah.
I'll give you a more
Yeah.
dramatic example. I work with a
Please.
guy who was a closeted gay man his entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And in his 50s, probably his 50s, maybe even his 60s. I mean, it was a problem because he was married. He was a
Mm-hmm.
minister.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
And
That's a
he came
twist.
out to his wife and daughter. And they stayed married. They both
Wow.
wanted to remain married. Obviously, they didn't have a sexual relationship.
Yeah.
But that was okay with them.
Yeah.
They loved each other,
Yeah.
not sexually,
Right.
but they talked about it for a long time and they decided they want to remain married.
Yeah. Because there were other things more important, the family cohesiveness. We can
Absolutely.
still file taxes jointly.
Whatever.
Yeah. All
That's
of these
what,
things.
it was a very courageous and honest
Yeah.
process. And he certainly felt a lot better not hiding that
Mhm.
secret for decades. And so, he felt like that was something he couldn't
Yeah.
tell her about it. And then he did. And what do you know?
Yeah. Because you don't know. And life is too short to sit in something that you're just so
Yeah.
unhappy in. Right. I say that all the time when, I say when women, mainly we talk to women, are upset about, getting a divorce or after the divorce. But, even for me, I'm like, gosh, I still got half my life left. Like, what am I doing? Get out there and,
Right.
find something that does bring me to a place where I am happy.
Exactly. Because in the
Yeah.
end, it's on us.
Yeah.
We're sitting around blaming other people and waiting for them to change, but it is on us.
Yes. Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about your book, Hidden Plain Sight, How Men's Fear of Women Shape Their Intimate Relationships.
Yes.
So kind of tell us what inspired you to totally write this. I know you've mentioned a little bit, and how you found that it resonates positively with men and women so far.
Well, it came from listening to men. It's sort of one of those things that once you have this idea about men being afraid of women, then you sort of wonder why everybody doesn't know this, because
Yeah.
I can't watch TV for 30 minutes without seeing it. I can't talk to a man for 10 minutes without being like, oh, you're scared of her. So like if you're listening to the show now, like when you go home, you're going to be like, oh
Yeah, we're
yeah,
gonna see everything differently.
you're going to see it everywhere. It's
Yeah.
once you understand it, you can't. So now, I'm cursed now. I can't not see it. So
Yeah.
I'm fairly critical of my field because I don't understand. Actually, Freud understood this 140 years ago, and then the field sort of forgot it for 100 years, which tends to happen in my field. We discover things and then we forget that we
Forget
knew
it.
them. But
Yeah.
so that's what happened. I was very lucky to have very good training in how to really listen to people, not
Yeah.
just kind of listen, but really listen and take people seriously, as we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And I listened, and it was just obvious to me that they were scared. And, you have to be kind of careful when you suggest to a man that he's scared of women. As I say, you sort of want to be beyond arm's length. You don't want to be in swinging distance when you
Yeah.
suggest something like that. But what would happen is guys would at first be kind of pissed,
Yeah.
but it never lasted more than a minute. It's astounding.
Yeah.
Within a minute, every guy I would suggest that to would look at me like, that makes a lot of sense. And then we would start unpacking stuff with that idea. And it just made so much sense. And
Yeah.
it really was like a lock and a key in a lock. It really
Yeah.
was. Everything that sort of hadn't made sense started to make sense. And I do groups with men,
Okay.
and the groups would just start riffing on it and going with it and unpacking stuff. And it was just clear to me that, like, I don't think of it as my idea. I just think of it as like, sort of like you add something to water and
Gross.
and guys just keep running with it. I get emails from
Yeah.
people all the time, this has been incredibly helpful in my
Oh, I
marriage.
love it.
I'm just like, I just added a little something to the water, and
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's just acknowledging it too, right? They don't even know it. A lot of people don't even see it or
no,
see how they
no.
are. So somebody bringing that to their attention.
And what's really interesting is it's women
Hmm.
who are taking and running with it as much or more. Because for women, if I can, I'd like to read you something.
Yes, please.
So I did this interesting workshop. It was a group of men and women, not couples, men and
Hmm.
women. And we met for 3 days.
Hmm.
And then 4 months later, we met for 3 days.
Okay.
In the intervening 4 months, it was the women who came back and said they had made the most changes in their relationships.
Okay.
And the reason is that it's sort of, for the women, they had been locked in pretty critical, even condescending places about the
Hmm.
men and their relationships.
Hmm.
And understanding the men as afraid
Hmm.
unlocked a lot of that critical approach and really allowed them to move to a more compassionate and empathic
Mm.
place. So one of
Yeah.
those women wrote this: I understand that my husband has not been ignoring, dismissing, or hurting me out of a lack of respect, as I suspected, but that he's scared. He's scared to hurt me, scared to mess up with me, scared to not be enough. I had honestly never imagined that he was scared, that I was so profoundly important to him that he was constantly terrified I would leave him. See, that's back to that whole thing about, in arguments, when men withdraw,
Hmm.
the only way women know and understand that is he doesn't care.
Yeah.
And then when you understand he withdraws because he cares so much, that really turns the table for women. It really changes how they understand their partner, and it just changes how women see their partners.
Yeah, I could relate to that for sure.
It does.
Yeah. So when a woman then is ready to make, she recognizes what's going on and wants to make the change, what would be the first step to do that you think?
Well, here's what, I mean, this is self-serving, but I can't help it. Here's what couples are doing, which I didn't think of, but they buy the book for their partners.
Okay.
But they read the book together chapter by chapter, which I think is a really cool idea. It was not my idea. They read chapter 1, but they don't read ahead. They read chapter 1 and then they talk about chapter 1 before they read on. Then they read chapter 2 and they talk. And so the way the conversations go basically are, the guy will say that, right? Because there's a lot of examples.
Yeah.
You know, like from real people. And the guy will say, that's me. That's what I've been trying to tell you. And she'll be like, I can't believe, really? That? So then it sort of opens. It's like a translator of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're experiencing it at the same time, which lets you know you're understanding each other.
So it becomes like a bridge, like a translator.
Wow. I like it. That's good. I've never really thought about it all this way. You know, it's often because we are very self-serving and we think about ourselves all the time. And when he's not doing what we want him to do, we're like, you know,
well, because it doesn't look like what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, men are really good. Men are really good at making it look like what it isn't. I mean, we don't want you to know we're scared.
Yeah. Yeah. But sometimes that vulnerability is like such a turn on. I mean, the right time.
If we knew that, we'd watch sex. That would be an incentive. That would be an incentive.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I do point that out to men. I wrote an article for Psychology Today called Men in Therapy, What's in It for You?
Yeah.
And I have a list of things, what you'll get from being therapy. And one is you'll make more money, which is generally true. And the other is you will have more sex. But even more important than more sex, you'll have a partner who's much more interested in sex. It's not just that she's going to say yes more often. She's going to be way more
actually enjoying it. That's awesome. That's awesome. So tell everybody where they can find your book, again, what it's called, and any of your other.
Simplest way to reach me is at my website, which is Avrum Weiss, PhD, which is AVRUMWEISS.PhD.com. You can sign up for the mailing list there, which will get you all future articles that I write and also a free ebook on relationships.
Oh, wonderful.
And I will answer every email I get within 24 hours. If you don't hear from me, I either didn't get your email, like I didn't get your email,
I know, like you didn't
or
answer
I'm in
mine.
the hospital. So, if you write to me, I will answer. If you have questions, I will respond to them.
Yeah. Wonderful.
That's the place to reach me.
I'm interested in this little matchmaking thing you said you do. You're consulting, so you consult on it.
The matchmaking company is the third largest matchmaking company in the country.
Yeah.
And I consult with them about men, about how to understand, because of course they're working largely, their clients are women.
Yeah.
So I consult with them about men, how men think and relationships.
Before they go on the date, or how
all
do you
all through the process.
You're like the consultant.
How
cool is that?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. A lot of people, I guess, do these matchmaking. Like
they do. I mean, a lot.
It's expensive, right?
It is. It's very expensive, but so's being alone.
And it is specific to you. It's very personal and they're finding exactly the right match for you.
I'm pretty impressed with their level of sophistication in terms of really working to pick. They don't just it's not like, eHarmony where they throw it. No, what you get for your money is they really do work to find somebody who they think will.
They actually want you to match with somebody, right? Unlike the dating sites.
That's their business model. I mean, like all businesses, they're completely reliant on satisfied customers.
Yeah. So. Well, I say that about the dating sites, how, they'll put up like Hinge, it'll say the app that's meant to be deleted, but I'm like, you don't really give us the tools for that. You only throw the people that may not be interested in, and the algorithms are set up. You don't see the people that you really want to see unless you pay, all that stuff.
It's true, but you know, first of all, I met my wife on a dating app, so I'm
Did
biased.
you? Okay.
Yes, I
Which
did.
one? Which
I
one?
met her on Match.
Oh, nice.
But there are going to be many, 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 many more people who are not suited for you than there are people who are. So you can't expect to have a high percentage of good connections.
Yeah.
So you have to be willing to put up with a lot of chaff to find,
we do. Yeah.
So that just comes with the territory.
Yeah.
But the question I always ask people who tell me that they don't want to use a dating app, I'm like, okay, really? How many new friends have you made in the last 3 years?
So true.
And the answer is always 0. I'm like, well, then,
Especially
okay,
after
so
COVID.
then how many? Right. Well,
Yeah.
even not during COVID.
Yeah.
So if you haven't made any new friends, what are the chances are you going to meet a new guy?
Yeah. I
So
just said that the other day.
It's just a way of meeting people.
It's
is. And like the story I told you about the woman who read the Affordable Care Act, I would never have met her.
Yeah.
So, it's a way to meet people.
Yeah, I agree. And so we just need to take it for what it is.
Yeah.
I think,
just don't get so serious about it.
it.
It's not a job. It's not, it's just a way to meet people.
Yeah. Yeah. Never know. A lot of people do meet that way. So that's great. So before you go, I have this little from Mrs. to Ms. fun facts. Yeah, just a little this or that. It's 10 relationship questions. Which one you would rather? Number 1, would you rather have an adventurous date exploring a new city together or a cozy night in with a homemade dinner and a movie?
First date?
Yes.
The adventurous exploring.
Adventurous date. Number 2, long-term.
Let me say more. It's too much pressure on a first date.
On a first date. So if I said 5th date, what would you say?
Oh, 5th date at home watching a movie. Because 5th date we're ready for sex. So
yeah. Number 2. So you do have a timeline there. 5's good.
Oh, by 5?
Good.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's good. Number 2, long-term commitment or spontaneous romance?
What's the question?
Which would you rather?
Oh, I'm long-term commitment.
Long-term commitment.
That's the stuff of life.
Yes, for sure. Would you rather date someone who shares all your hobbies and interests, but has different values? And I know the answer to this from your one girl, or someone with similar values, but few shared interests.
Values.
Yeah.
Interest. I got interest. I have friends.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you can do them by yourself too. Okay. Number 4, freedom with limited connection or a deep connection with compromises.
Deep connection. It's all about connection.
Yeah. And compromising, I remember somebody saying, we often think of compromises as settling, and it's not, it's compromising.
Yeah. I don't think compromising is the word I would use. It's definitely not the word I would use. I think people get in trouble when they think about it as compromising. It's more like consensus. The difference between compromise and consensus is when if you and I just we're in a process to decide what time this interview we're going to be. Compromise might end up with a time that neither one of us or one of us really weren't happy with. Yeah. Consensus is when you stay at it until we come up with a time when we both really can.
Oh, good example. Yeah, you're right. And compromise can often be looked at as like a negative thing, like you are now sacrificing or giving up something.
Compromise there can be a loser in compromise, and you don't want, in an intimate relationship, you don't want to come up with an answer that the other person doesn't really feel good about.
I like that.
Like if we say we'll compromise, we'll go to your family for Thanksgiving this year and mine next year, and you just can't not go to your family for Thanksgiving. Okay, then I need to understand why. Tell me about going to your family for Thanksgiving every year. Tell me the history. Tell me why that's so important to you. Tell me the meaning of it. Tell me the history of it. Tell me.
Yeah, I like it. Okay, number 5.
Might leave all that out.
Totally agreed. Number 5, would you rather have an unforgettable first date, but no second date? We already talked about this one. You actually did. Or a mediocre first date that leads to a long-term relationship?
Mediocre for sure. I did have a mediocre first date. I told my wife on our first date that I didn't think we were a good fit.
Oh, you did?
You did. What a moron am I, huh?
And here you are. That's funny. You had exactly that whole example. Number 6, spontaneous makeout sessions or planned candlelight dinners?
Oh, spontaneous.
Spontaneous is where it's at. Number 7, another one like similar, comfortable routine or adventurous spontaneity?
Both.
Yeah,
Not cheating.
I think you're right.
No,
Sometimes it's
not a
nice
forced
to have
choice.
it good.
That's
Yeah.
where people get in trouble. They think it's a forced choice. It's
Yeah.
not.
Number 8, trying new positions or mastering the old ones.
Both. Again, it's not a forced choice.
Number 9, you might say it again, slow dancing in the living room or spontaneous dance moves in the kitchen.
Both. It's not a forced choice.
We have to
And
come
we
up
do
with a
both.
tougher one. They make you
And
really
we do
choose.
both. I love both.
You do?
Yes.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Okay, number 10, last question. Tease to build anticipation or straight for the fireworks?
Oh, tease.
People don't realize how important that teasing in the
I
foreplay
love
is. You got to
teasing.
build
Yeah.
that up, right?
Teasing is
It's
great.
important. Yeah. Thanks
I
for
love your
playing that.
questions.
Thank
Those are
you.
great questions.
It was fun. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This was really wonderful information because I don't think we really think about that, especially as women. The majority of my audience listening is women, but I wanted you to come on here because I do have a lot of men on here as well that I want them to hear what you're saying and understand that, maybe if they're feeling that way, to know they're not alone, first of all, right? You build a
No,
whole career on it, obviously,
certainly not.
and there is something that can be done.
Let me say this in closing. I was in a workshop recently. It was a woman therapist teaching a workshop for women therapists who wanted to work with men. And she asked a very interesting question. She said, how many of you like men? About a third of the women put their hands right up. About a third went, maybe, and a third never raised their hands.
Okay.
So what I would hope that what today's conversation would help your women listeners is to move closer to liking men.
Yeah.
Not all men.
Yeah.
But men. Because if you're heterosexual, it'd be good if you like men.
Yeah.
And God knows there are a lot of reasons to not like men.
Yeah.
But if you are going to be in an intimate relationship with a man, it'd be good to figure out what's getting in the way of your not liking men and see what you can do about that, because it would be getting in the way of your being in an intimate relationship with a man.
Yeah. I think
so
that's
I hope that this conversation maybe helped you get closer to liking men.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to tag on that because a lot of times, especially, I talk to a lot of women about coming out of divorce, they are in that angry stage, right? Like they're angry with men, and that's probably a third that's not liking men at the moment.
Yeah. Good reason. But you're going to have to figure out, if you want to be in an intimate relationship with men, you're going to have to figure
it out
some way to like them.
Yeah. I like them.
I think that's very clear.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Welcome.
I really appreciate it. Again, you can find his book pretty much anywhere. Am I right?
It's on Amazon.
Amazon.
And all those kind of places.
Great. It's called Hidden in Plain Sight: How Men's Fear of Women Shape Their Intimate Relationships. So thank you everyone for listening. I hope you got some wonderful information out of this, and you can find me on any social media platform at from.mrs.2.ms. You can email me with any questions at info@frommrs2ms.net. Have a wonderful week, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.